Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we get started, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's jump into today's tale. Chapter 1. The Architect of His Own Ruin. James Reed had always been a builder, not of structures or monuments, but of quieter things. Trust, steadiness, a life tallied in mortgage payments and anniversary dinners at the same Italian restaurant where he'd proposed. For 17 years he constructed a marriage with Christine Palmer, convinced his steady hands and dependable heart provided a foundation for forever. He ought to have seen the fissures earlier. The advertising agency he'd poured 2 decades into downsized 6 months earlier, and James's role as senior creative director became merely an item on a severance sheet. When he told Christine, she smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes, and mouthed the right lines about fresh starts and new opportunities. Within a week she filed for divorce. The process was clinical. Christine's lawyer, a shark named Maurice Mulroy, teeth too white and a reputation for eviscerating men, ripped through James's finances like disease. The house bought with James's grandmother's inheritance went to Christine. The savings account was emptied as compensation for her emotional suffering. The car, the furniture, even the damn espresso machine James had saved months to buy. "Your Honor," Mulroy declared, adjusting his Rolex with theatrical precision, "my client gave up her career to support Mr. Reed's ambitions. She is owed restitution for those lost years." The falsehood was so bold James almost laughed in court. Christine had quit her receptionist job after 3 months of marriage, citing migraines. She spent the next 17 years honing her tennis serve at the country club James couldn't afford. The judge, a gray-haired woman who looked like she'd heard every tale twice, awarded Christine 70% of everything. James left the courthouse with his clothes, his grandfather's watch, and a checking balance of $247. That night Christine called, not to apologize or show a sliver of remorse, but to gloat. "You'll die alone and broke," she said, her laughter as sharp as shattering glass. "That's what happens to men who bore me, James. You're always so adequate. Roger says, I should have left you years ago." The name hit like a blow. Roger Clemens, his former partner, the man who'd stood as best man at their wedding and who'd eaten at their table every Sunday for 5 years, had voted to cut James's position during the downsizing. James hung up without a word. What was there to say? She'd already taken what mattered. Almost everything. He still had his plasma. Chapter 2. The Transaction. The donation center sat squeezed between a pawnshop and a check-cashing storefront on the east side, the kind of block where desperation looked familiar. James had driven past it countless times, never picturing himself walking through its doors. The waiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and surrender. A teenage mother bounced a crying infant on her knee. An elderly man with trembling hands filled out forms with agonizing slowness. A woman James's age stared into nothing, her eyes hollow. "First time?" the receptionist asked. Her name tag read Kara. Her eyes were kind but tired. "That obvious. You're wearing a tie." She slid a clipboard across the desk. "Fill this out. We pay $40 for first donations." $40. James had spent more than that on wine he couldn't tell apart by taste. Now it was 2 weeks' groceries if he shopped frugally. He took the clipboard to a plastic chair that wobbled on uneven legs and began to fill in the blanks of his downsized life. The nurse who called him back was young and professionally cheerful in a way that felt rehearsed. "I'm Emily," she said, leading him to a chair that looked like it belonged in a dentist's nightmare. "Ever donated before?" "Never," he answered. "No problem. I'll do a quick health screen, vitals, blood tests. The whole process takes about 90 minutes. She wrapped a blood pressure cuff around his arm. "So, what brings you in today?" "Rent," James said simply. Emily's practiced smile softened into something sincere. "I hear that." She drew 3 vials with practiced ease. "Okay, I'll send these to the lab in 5. She didn't. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. James watched the clock and the other donors cycling through their chairs. Tubes gleamed like a dystopian assembly line harvesting human fluid for profit. When Emily returned, her face was different, the color drained, hands trembling slightly as she gripped his file. "Sir," she said, voice controlled, "stay right here. Don't move. I need to call someone." Ice ran through James's veins. "Cancer. HIV. Something terminal found in his blood. Nothing's wrong, he said, pleading. She vanished into the back office. Through the window he saw her on the phone, gesturing urgently. 2 staffers huddled around her computer, looking from the screen to James. 20 minutes later 3 men in suits burst through the doors like they owned the place, cutting through the donors with purposeful authority and expensive cologne. The lead was silver-haired, in his 60s, imposing in a charcoal suit that likely cost more than James's last paycheck. His eyes locked on James with laser focus. He walked directly to James's chair, stopped, and stared. His face shifted through shock, disbelief, and something near relief. After 32 years, he whispered loud enough for James to hear, "We finally found you." Chapter 3. The inheritance in his veins. The man introduced himself as Albert Riddle, CEO of Riddle Pharmaceuticals. The other 2 were lawyers who blurred into the background. They ushered James into a back office of the donation center he hadn't known existed, all dark wood and leather, a stark jolt from the fluorescent waiting room. "Mr. Reed," Albert began, settling into a chair with the gravity of a man about to alter someone's life, "I apologize for the theatrical entrance. What we've found in your blood," he paused to choose words carefully, "is nothing short of miraculous." "I have cancer," James replied flatly. "What?" Albert actually laughed. "No, Mr. Reed, you may be the healthiest person in this city. What you possess is something we've hunted since 1993, a genetic mutation so rare our models estimated only 3 to 5 people on Earth might have it." He slid a folder across the desk. Charts, graphs, genetic sequences that looked like abstract art. 32 years ago my daughter was diagnosed with Herman syndrome. Do you know what that is? James shook his head. Most doctors never see it. It's a degenerative neurological disorder that destroyed her nervous system cell by cell. She was 8. Albert's voice broke. We tried every treatment, every experiment. She died in 1995, 2 months before turning 11. I dedicated my company to finding a cure. I'm sorry, James said, sincerely. We discovered the disease stems from a specific protein deficiency. The human body can't produce this protein naturally except in the rarest cases. People with a mutation on the HRNX4 gene. Albert tapped the folder. People like you. I don't understand, James murmured. Your plasma, Mr. Reed, contains antibodies that can not only treat Herman syndrome but potentially cure it. There are 847 diagnosed cases in the US alone. Worldwide, thousands. Children are dying because their bodies can't produce what yours does naturally. One lawyer leaned forward. Mr. Reed, Riddle Pharmaceuticals will offer you an exclusive plasma donation contract, twice weekly donations, full medical care, and compensation of $15 million. Albert interrupted. A $5 million signing bonus, $10 million over 5 years, plus royalties on any treatment developed from your plasma. The number didn't compute. That morning he'd been counting pennies to choose between paying electricity or buying food. Why? He managed. Because you have something money can't buy, Albert said. Because 847 families pray for what your blood contains. And because I won't let what happened to my daughter happen to another child if I can prevent it. James looked at the contract. The lawyer slid it closer. The figures were real, the signatures genuine. This was happening. I need time to think, he said. Albert nodded slowly. Take 24 hours. But Mr. Reed, every day we delay, children die. They gave him a card, a phone number, and a $40 check for his donation. James walked out in a daze, the contrast surreal enough to wonder if he'd imagined it. His phone rang as he reached his car. A 15-year-old Honda Christine's lawyer had said wasn't worth fighting for. It was Frank Norden, his only true friend who'd stood by him through the divorce. James, where are you? I've been calling. Donating plasma, James said, the absurdity crashing over him. Listen, I heard something you need to know. I ran into Bridget Palmer at the grocery. Christine's sister, the one who seemed sympathetic during the divorce, got drunk and bragged. James, Christine, and Roger have been planning this for over a year. They engineered your removal from the firm so they could take your job and shares. Roger's been promoted to CEO. They're selling the company to Widmore Media next month for $16 million. Christine gets half because they've been partners. James's hand tightened on the phone. She ruined me for $8 million. There's more, Frank continued. Bridget said Christine deliberately prolonged the divorce to bleed your legal funds and make you accept her terms. She called it breaking you. The sun was setting, painting the parking lot red. James looked at the donation center and then at Albert Riddle's business card in his hand. $15 million, 847 dying children, and a woman who'd laughed while she destroyed him. Frank, James said quietly, I need you to do something for me. Don't tell anyone what I'm about to tell you. Can you keep that? Of course. Good, because I'm about to get very wealthy. And Christine is about to learn what it costs to underestimate adequate men. Chapter 4. The Devil in the Details. At 9 o'clock the next morning James signed the contract in Albert Riddle's downtown office, a glass tower looking down on the city like a benevolent god. The lawyers watched the check clear with a digital efficiency that felt unreal. Just like that, James Reed was worth $5 million, with $10 million more on the way. Welcome to Riddle Pharmaceuticals, Albert said, shaking his hand. We'll begin comprehensive testing tomorrow. I want you under the best care. I appreciate that, James said, but I have a request. Albert's eyebrows rose. Go on. Keep my participation completely confidential. No press releases, no announcements. Let the world think James Reed is still broke. James smiled for the first time in months. Call it a social experiment. He left and drove straight to Frank's modest two-bedroom apartment. Frank waited with coffee and the tactical mind he'd honed in the army before turning accountant. Okay, Frank said, spreading papers on the table. Roger Clemens doesn't just want your job, he wants to erase you. He's been telling everyone you're dead weight, that you haven't had a good idea in years. Creative revisionism. It gets worse. I pulled the company's financials, don't ask how. The Whitmore Media deal hinges on showing growth. Roger's been cooking the books, claiming your projects as his. The Kaufman campaign, the Riverside rebrand, your work, now credited to him. He's been feeding Moroi information too. They've been partners since the start. How long? James asked. Best guess. 2 years, maybe longer. Frank poured more coffee. Why go this far? Roger's got money. Christine already has most of yours. Because Christine doesn't just want things, James said. She wants to win. She dominated at tennis, ended friendships over slights, kept score of everything. Leaving me with nothing is the ultimate victory. So what's the play? James opened his banking app and showed Frank the balance, $5,247. Frank froze, coffee halfway to his mouth. My blood is worth $15 million to a pharmaceutical company. They found a mutation that can cure a rare disease. James smiled. Christine tried to leave him with nothing. She left him with everything. Okay, but what are you going to do? Frank asked. I'm going to destroy them, James said. Not with more court dates. I'll dismantle what they built piece by piece and make them watch. Over the next 3 hours they sketched the framework. Publicly, James would remain broke, living in the cheap studio he'd rented in a building that smelled of mildew and broken dreams, continuing the act of desperation. Privately, he'd use his money to quietly and methodically unravel Christine and Roger's empire. First, James said, I need information. Everything about them. Where's Roger vulnerable? Frank consulted his notes. Gambling. He thinks he hides it. Poker nights every Thursday at the Riverside Casino. He's in for about 60 grand. Good. Christine. Expensive tastes. Country club fees, spa memberships, that new Lexus. She's burning through the settlement. They need the Whitmore sale to close. James stood and walked to Frank's window, staring at the sprawling city. Then we make sure it doesn't, he said. And we watch them self-destruct. Chapter 5. Pawns and Players. James learned the key to revenge wasn't fury but patience and capital. He set up a shell corporation in Delaware named Norwood Ventures, managed by a corporate attorney who asked no questions as long as the retainer cleared. Through Norwood he began buying debt. Roger's gambling markers were first. $63,000 in bad bets purchased from a casino for 0.7 cents on the dollar. Legal, clean, and suddenly Norwood owned Roger's desperation. Don't call him, Frank warned when James suggested contact. Not yet. Let him sweat. The casino had been patient, but Norwood didn't have to be. Instead, James had the attorney send a polite demand for immediate payment, 45 days to settle or face legal action. The second move was subtler. James hired Marty Bishop, a PI and former cop with a whiskey voice and a knack for finding hidden things. Marty's first task: document Roger and Christine's lives, every lunch, meeting, indiscretion. They weren't careful. 2 weeks later Marty slid a folder of photos across the diner table. Country club lunches 3 times a week, champagne and oysters, Christine in jewelry that cost more than James's car. James recognized the diamond bracelet, $30,000 at Cartier, something she'd once said was her dream piece. They're spending like they've already won, Marty said. Also, Bridget Palmer isn't loyal. She's in deep financial trouble. 3 maxed credit cards, behind on mortgage, bitter that Christine got everything while she got nothing. She's one conversation away from spilling everything. James smiled. Then let's have that conversation. Bridget Palmer lived in a townhouse that looked decent from the curb but betrayed quiet desperation in the details. An overgrown lawn, faded paint, a decade-old minivan with a cracked windshield. James knocked on a Tuesday morning with coffee and an offer. She answered in yoga pants and a stained sweatshirt, hair pulled back. "James, what are you doing here?" she said. "I wanted to thank you for what you told Frank." Bridget went pale. "I was drunk. I shouldn't have said anything." "Can I come in?" he asked. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside confirmed his suspicion. Furniture from better days, family photos, worn carpet. "I'm not here to cause trouble," James said, sitting on her couch. "I'm here to offer you a job." "A job," she repeated. "Christine trusts you, tells you things. I need to know what she plans, what worries her, what keeps her up. I'm offering $10,000 now and $5,000 a month for 6 months. Just be yourself. Listen, remember, tell me." Bridget stared at the envelope like it might bite. "That's a lot of money." "Consider it payment for years of being undervalued," James said. "Christine got millions in the divorce. What did you get? Debt and a sister who only calls to brag." Her hand reached for the cash but stopped. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because she laughed when she took everything from me. Because Roger destroyed my career and called it business. Because adequate men, pushed far enough, get dangerous." James left the envelope on the table and stood to go. "You don't have to decide now. But Bridget, your mortgage is 3 months behind. How long before you lose this place?" She called that night and agreed. Chapter 6. The board is set. The medical testing at Riddle Pharmaceuticals took 3 weeks. Dr. Virginia Murphy, head of research, ran every scan and analysis, mapping James's genetic code with the precision of a cartographer.